Before talking about what's happening now, I think it's useful to go back to the end of the great financial crisis.
What we know now is Wall Street can bring down Main Street.
Why wasn't I on it? My employees pain. I wake up every single night thinking.
This is because a lot of people were confused about what the US government and some European governments were doing at the time. There was a risk of a huge financial contagion. So the US government stepped in and the Federal Reserve started to use their balance sheet. Fed raises 75, we're done, they're going to raise 75 more. I just think that's not how it's probably going to be. It's going to take, 24, 36 months. And that may mean the bottom doesn't happen for another 18 months. I think we're in for a lot of choppy market action. We may not be negotiating with Russia, but we're letting them print huge surpluses, which means, I don't know if you guys saw, but there was an article today. All the payment rails, banks and Stripe, send me a structured feed so I can get a very accurate sense of inflation. Inflation only happens when a good or service is traded for money. So if you figured out what that thing traded for the day before and what it trades for today, you could get a very accurate sense of inflation.
This morning, inflation at the highest rate it has been since 1982. Americans saying they feel it every day.
2021 was a very expensive year for Americans.
Despite a cold December, inflation was red hot. Consumer prices grew at the fastest annual pace since 1982.
Who can budget? You just have to pay the price.
Instead, we do this random sampling thing. So if you read this article, your takeaway is, all of these problems need to be solved. If they aren't, prices will keep going up, and the Fed will lose what little credibility it has left by saying, we think we're done right now, which they can't do. Instead, they will overcorrect because there will be so much pressure on them to do so. I do think we can know these things without sampling in such a sloppy way, and now you know we're going to look. We've had a system of overcorrecting and undercorrecting for years. But the problem is that the stakes keep getting higher as the economy grows and gets more complicated and we have more power. I also have a quick story to tell you. One of the most interesting signs of trouble was what happened to Facebook 2 days ago. From an economic point of view, this ties a lot of this stuff together. Inflation, asset prices, equities. People were saying that the market was going to go crazy when it opened. On Tuesday, the S&P was up about 250 basis points and the Nasdaq was up about 300 basis points, but Facebook was down about 400 points.
We're headed further down that are coming now that we've got to stay higher. You've got to have some productivity in order for those margins to do.
Bond market leads.
That's a big difference, and I was thinking, this doesn't make any sense. What's going on with this price? So I called around and asked, why is everything going up except Facebook? Part of the government agrees that you have to really protect consumers. For example, if you look at the securities laws, they are meant to protect consumers at all costs. The reason for this is that sometimes you want people to make good decisions. But if you give them a lot of money, they're just going to spend it. What we did was give people a lot of money, and they spent it.
Thank you. The largest shopping day of the year has arrived as many shoppers either camped out all night or...
Said some people either stayed up all night or are here early this morning for those Black Friday deals.
And I have this in my head. I need to get here early. And, yeah.
You're assuming that demand is stable all of a sudden, but it's not always stable. In a demand contraction, people get fired, but there are also fewer and more specific job openings. Again, we're at the beginning of the beginning. For those of us who lived through 2000, this was 4 years of pure hell and the grind.
If you go back to 1929 to 2000, to Japan, and the housing part of the housing bubble, and you ask, how did conditions look? Profit margins look great, the forecast was great, we should be in a recession, mild or severe is the question, but we should be in some sort of recession fairly quickly.
Now we have $30 trillion to deal with, a recession to get out of, and a war to end. Surplus has grown by more than 3 times in the first 4 months of the year. Imports and exports fell because of sanctions.
Ukraine's President Zelensky spoke with President Biden as well as the leaders of France and Turkey over the weekend, ahead of a planned G7 and EU meeting today to discuss further sanctions on Russia.
This weekend, as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had conversations with the leaders of France, Turkey, and with President Biden that the U.S. would support Ukraine's air defense systems. The Russian leader, for his part, Vladimir Putin, has maintained that he does not see, quote, any path forward when it comes to any kind of meaningful negotiations to end this war, which is...
If you're Putin and you see this, you might think, wow, maybe I should be under sanctions more often. What country should I invade next? So, not only did our sanctions package not work, and not only is the Treasury flailing around trying to find even more backdoors, but we also set a very dangerous precedent by letting oil settle in currencies other than the United States dollar.